All right, and we're back with the show. It's Gerald coming right back at you one more time, talking some Quentin Tarantino. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is coming out this weekend. A lot of people are looking forward to it. I'll tell you what, it is right now just the talk of the town in Hollywood, coming off of what we saw at San Diego Comic-Con with all those other great pop culture projects that are out there. But right now in theaters, it is all about Tarantino. A lot of stuff going on with him, his future, and of course, what's going on now with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And here to talk more about Quentin Tarantino with me is an excellent podcaster himself. You got to catch right now, after we talk on right here on the show, you got to go ahead and catch the Trash Talk podcast and Last Week in Basketball. Both of those podcasts are available on virtually every major podcast outlet. I can tell you right now, if it's available on ours, their show is available as well. He's got a tremendous 2 podcasts as well, and a third one on the way with the Beer and Pretzel RPG podcast. It is truly a pleasure to have him on the show. It's Austen Sprake. And Austen, just glad to have you once again on the show.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to talk about some Tarantino.
I am as well. I mean, I had some great conversations so far, a lot of great things, a lot of great ideals, it's just nice to see the way he affects people with his, I guess, a different kind of filmmaking that he does. So it's just interesting to see how, his type of filmmaking affects people. But you have a history and background with Tarantino. You've actually studied his work in great detail, have you not?
Yeah, in college, I spent a lot of time and wrote many papers on different films of his, even some of the less known ones like Death Proof, Kill Bill. I think Volume 1 I wrote about, and then, of course, the classics like Pulp Fiction and Inglourious Bastards. But I studied a lot about Tarantino, took a couple of Tarantino classes, and just a fan, just like everyone else, of his work.
When you get to the point where they're naming classes after Tarantino, like you said, Tarantino classes, that shows you've made a mark in the industry. Filmmakers alike that are coming up these days, they studied, like you said, studied like yourself, studied Tarantino's work time and time again, and see where this is going with his career. And in many ways, maybe taken a little bit of things here and there from it to get his type of ideals across. Going back into the first things that you were seeing in regards to Quentin Tarantino, what was the first film you saw when it comes to Tarantino, and how did that move you physically?
For me, it was Pulp Fiction, which is probably a good place to start. And for me, it was just a very different experience because I was watching something that had so much style to it. Because what I love about Tarantino is that there's a million other great filmmakers, Spielberg, Scorsese, but with Spielberg, even though he's had a lot more films and he's won multiple Oscars, with Spielberg, he makes a lot of good films consistently, except you don't see a lot of his own style in it. He can make a film and he can make it very well, but you don't see a film and go, oh, I can recognize that as a Spielberg film without looking at the credits. With Quentin Tarantino, you instantly can tell, like some other directors like Wes Anderson, you can instantly tell what a Wes Anderson film is because it's very different than any other film. Tarantino was the same way, and he was really the first director that I noticed that had a unique style in terms of not only filmmaking like a lot of other filmmakers, but writing as well as how he casts his actors and how he directs them. So Pulp Fiction was probably my first experience. And then after that, I just kept trying a new one, going to the library at school, grabbing a new movie and trying it out. And then branching on to other movies that were like him, like his work, because other directors have tried, sometimes successful, sometimes not, to emulate his style. So it's kind of interesting to see other films that were influenced by Tarantino's work.
And that's also something to talk about, is because the actors that have been associated with Tarantino movies, not only actors that are well known today like Samuel L. Jackson and Leonardo DiCaprio is now involved with a project now, and other great, in fact, he's actually been on more than one occasion, Leonardo DiCaprio. And you see other great actors always going to go and gravitate towards his work. Samuel Jackson on virtually every major project that he's ever done. But when it comes to some lesser known actors, or I don't want to say forgotten actors, but actors that never really got their recognition until they appeared in Quentin Tarantino movies, such as Robert Forster, to say that, name one right off the top of my head. You see a lot of those type of individuals that not only are well known, but also others that for some reason or another, maybe it's just because of the fact that Quentin Tarantino is such a filmaholic himself, that he has such a film history background, that he knows the filmography of a lot of stars, and he's come to appreciate a lot of work of some older stars as well, that he still was able to go ahead and manage to integrate those older, lesser known stars with modern, well-known, high-profile stars as well.
Yeah, that's what I love about him, because just like you were saying, Forrester is one, also Pam Grier. We kind of forget, but John Travolta at the time of Pulp Fiction was kind of on like the bottom of the hill. He was heading down quickly. His career was kind of going downwards. And then Tarantino brought that back. He was nominated for Best Supporting Actor. It might have been Best Leading Actor. But and then there's other actors, including for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. We're unfortunately not going to see it, but he did cast Burt Reynolds for a part in the movie, and Burt Reynolds was so excited to be in it. And this was going to be potentially kind of a John Travolta situation, that Tarantino brought Burt Reynolds back into the spotlight. And that's because he wanted him. Other filmmakers, they might not take the gamble on Burt Reynolds or John Travolta, but Tarantino, like you said, he's seen all their work and he knows how to use them within his own movie. And unfortunately, Burt Reynolds is not being in the movie, of course, because he passed away.
But also Luke Perry, who, his career never quite materialized the way he wanted to, based off of his 90210 fame. I think a lot of people in Hollywood had pigeonholed him into a certain area. There are heavy rumors about his inclusion in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, that it could open up a lot of eyes with his performance in the movie, and that's something that unfortunately he's passed away, but something that he could have actually delved into more as far as serious acting roles, instead of the cheeky pop type roles that he was limited to for quite some time. So it's interesting to see how he was able to not only land that role, but from what a lot of critics are saying and things of that nature, and a lot of leeway is put in there by other individuals that have seen the movie at Cannes and whatnot, that he could have he now could have, as far as his career is concerned, unfortunately, his untimely death, but he could at least have a nice shining star put on at the end of his career.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. That sometimes he takes actors that have been going on the decline and he brings them back, but sometimes he can take an actor who's lesser known for whatever reason. For Perry, he's at the moment he was kind of only not nominated. He's been only known for the Riverdale series recently, and that's just a CW show. It's kind of aimed more towards teenagers, and he probably wanted to head in a direction where his career would actually take off. But Tarantino has that power to bring actors in and kind of transform their careers, and it's kind of unfortunate of his untimely demise, because like you said, we might see more of him if we got to see more of him after this.
I know his career would probably have taken off if that would have been the case. Unfortunately, we won't be able to see how it would have materialized. It's a shame again about the untimely death of Luke Perry. But there is so many great moments when it comes to Tarantino movies. And I know it's hard to pick just one, but before we go into your favorite movie when it comes to Tarantino, but I think I already know already, since you kind of hinted at it already, what is probably your favorite scene when it comes to any of the Tarantino movies that you've ever watched?
Okay, that's a good question, because I can almost name one or multiple terrific scenes from each of his movies, even the ones that people don't care for as much, like Death Proof. I have multiple scenes from that movie that I love. If we're going for my absolute favorite, I'm going to have to say it's either between in Inglorious Bastards, the first time we see Hans Landa, he's driving up. with his battalion on the motorcycles, and they go to the farmer's house. He's hiding the Jewish girls underneath his house, and there's a long scene. It's like close to 15 minutes long with Hans Landa and the farmers just sitting in his house having a glass of milk and just talking, most of which isn't in English. And it's just such a great scene because he can turn. There's not much camera movement within it. There is some, but it's not shot and edited to be super exciting and flashy. But the suspense is there because of the acting and also because, of course, the great writing by Tarantino. So that might be my favorite, but also a classic scene from Pulp Fiction. There are multiple, but probably for me would be when John Travolta and Uma Thurman go up on the stage and dance after getting the milkshakes, the $5 milkshakes. Those probably were my favorite scenes. What about you?
That's a very iconic scene. For me, it's going to be in Kill Bill with Uma Thurman taking on the Yakuza. And that scene in the house, I'll tell you what, where blood was spraying everywhere. It was truly a sight. The people that were with me were getting ill. I was just loving it, and it was funny because we saw it in the theaters. And as you know, there's blood spraying all over the place.
Yep.
Fake blood, of course, everyone out there, of course. But to me, it was kind of just hilarious to see at points of time. But still, just a truly remarkable scene where just the tempo changed several times during the course of that scene, but the mood and the way that he was reflecting the intensity of that scene was still nonetheless apparent throughout, because people sometimes say, oh well, that scene's took too long and drawn out, blah 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 blah. I still think for what it was worth and the numbers she was up against, it fit perfectly for what he was doing, what he was trying to accomplish, and it really, to me, showed Uma Thurman's talents to the max right there. Yes, she can act really well. We know that. I've seen her, we saw Pulp Fiction where she really did an outstanding job. We've seen her in many other movies, but this one right here for me, just having that vengeance in that scene, just to me, and then actually finishing it up with Lucy Liu at the end right there, just truly was a great point in time for me to watch his and appreciate his films. So that's probably my favorite scene as far as that whole arc right there. I know it's a little bit longer, but you're talking about a great scene with Inglourious Basterds, which is in my top 3 when it comes to him. And I'll tell you what, I think you just would have given the Oscar to Christoph Waltz right there and then. I mean, yes, he did a great job throughout the rest of the movie, but it's one of those great first impressions in movies in Hollywood that I've ever seen. To me, openings really get me when there's a really very, very good opening. I'm going to, for other movies, I'm going to say the rebooted Star Trek in 2009 with Chris Hemsworth. That's what put him on the map as a superstar, is his emotion in that scene, in that opening scene, and that part just before the title credits came up. And in Saving Private Ryan, I mean, when you go and you see the D-Day and they're attacking Omaha Beach, that right there, when you saw that really gripped you as an audience member. And the same thing goes for Inglourious Basterds, where you had the great Christoph Waltz right there. He grabbed the whole audience and had it in the palm of his hands by the end of that scene. Nobody knew who he was. Nobody had seen him before in the audience. Nobody had really, just who is this guy? But he just commanded the scene. By the end of that scene right there, you just wanted to know who he was, and you just truly appreciated that he just knocked it out of the park.
Oh yeah, I agree. Throughout the movie, there are many great characters in that movie, and Hans Landa, of course, is the villain of it, but he's the one character that commands respect and the one character that can kind of control the audience. And that really was, like you said, the first time audiences have seen Christoph Waltz in anything. And even though he has gone on to do other things, he won an Oscar for Inglourious Basterds. He won an Oscar for Django Unchained, also done by Tarantino. And he has done some other films, like he did one of the more recent Bond films, but he hasn't really done anything close to anywhere close to the quality of Inglourious Basterds or Django Unchained. And
I mean,
it's
not
just a
even
show.
Alita Battle
Yeah.
Angel is good, but it's
I
not to
forgot
the
about that.
level.
Yep.
Yeah, it's not to the level of Inglorious Bastards or any of his performances there. But he carried it as best he could, and also as well, he's coming back for the next Bond movie. So interested in seeing where his Blofeld character will go from there. But yeah, you're right. Just truly tremendous actor. I cannot say good enough good things. And again, that put him on a map. I wonder if he gives like residual checks to Tarantino every time he does a film now.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. To go off what you were saying about the Kill Bill scene, I totally agree because time-wise, it's a long scene if you put it all together, but it is a scene or a sequence of scenes, and it's just so well done because it starts even before the fight. There is the long tracking shot of her going throughout the is it a bar? What is that? I forget what kind of place. It's like a restaurant.
Yeah, it was. I
And
believe it was a restaurant.
yeah, she's just walking through the restaurant. Even we get the tracking crane shot following her the whole time. Great shot scene. And then for the actual fight in, and with Tarantino, he's known for violence. We see violence throughout all of his films. But at that point, because we haven't seen Tarantino's violence and action use in Django, his violence was more shock violence. That was kind of the first time we got to see like full blown action, like you would go to see an action film during the summer. That was the first time we got to see Tarantino's work with long sequences of action. And like you said, it's just super fun to watch. And just how Uma Thurman is able to handle the stunts on the ground level and her also doing like the flips to go to the second story. There's the fight with the silhouettes in the background when the light kind of makes everyone, the fighters and her silhouettes. Very cool. And then she fights the girl, Go-Go, I want to say her name is, the girl with the spiked ball. And then afterwards, she fights the head of the gang outside in the snow, which is part of the same scene, but it's a very different in terms of how they shoot it. It's much slower, it's much more dramatic, and the music changes. And that whole sequence of scenes is just so good. So I think I might agree with you. If we're counting all that as one scene, that might be my favorite, or at least second favorite scene.
I remember reading a long time ago that sequence or that scene, that moment of time in the film took several months, if I'm not mistaken, where they were filming that. Because they weren't filming that in Japan. I believe they were filming it in other parts of Asia. And I think that scene itself took so long. And I can see why. Because like you said, there's just so much in detail. You have to go ahead to get from point A to point Z, that there was so much detail to it as far as to make it one complete arc right there. That, yeah, just the time that you take as a filmmaker. But again, Tarantino, once he created Pulp Fiction and put that out there, he gained that type of clout, so where he could go ahead and push the envelope to where he wanted to push it and be able to take as much time as he needed to take it. Because in the span that he's been a director of accredited films, there's been so many other directors that have made multiple more films than he has. So your thoughts on his, I don't want to say his lack of activity, but the fact is, this is number 9, the 9th film by Quentin Tarantino coming up when it concerns Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Do you think that's been the right move for him to take so much time between projects, or do you think he also could have gotten a little bit more active and maybe put out just as good a quality of product each and every time? Not mind you, 2-3 films a year, mind you, but at least maybe one every 2 years consistently.
Yeah, that's a good question because he takes a very long time to make a film, usually at least 5 years. And we kind of have to look at it from a different couple aspects because he's not only the director, like Spielberg approaches something as the director and producer, he sees and oversees everything, but he's not really the main scriptwriter. Tarantino is the main scriptwriter, and he's the best at what he does. He's the king of dialogue. Could he do a film, like you said, every 2 or 3 years? Yeah, he probably could. The thing though is with The Hateful Eight and even now this film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, both of these started off as ideas for novels, and authors usually, unless it's Stephen King, who apparently can make like 5 books a year, most authors take a long time, multiple years to make their books, especially if they're going to put a lot of work into it and make it really, really good. in Tarantino's case, every film he does, magnificent script. If people like it or not, the script itself is very, very well done. So I don't think he could be anywhere close to a Spielberg in that he can do a film a year or multiple or even a film every other year. He should be able to do a film every 3 years, be kind of in the same boat as Scorsese, but Tarantino's kind of a director who's a little bit anal. He wants to do things perfectly his way, or he just won't do it. For example, Hateful Eight, the script got leaked, and even though it was a terrific script, a great story, he put a lot of work and time into it, and everyone wanted to see that movie. He, for a while, refused to actually make the film. He just didn't want to because it was spoiled. So I'm going to say that he could do it if it was once every 3 years. And I don't think it would affect the quality because he's just such a good writer. I would kind of actually be interested to see him do more movies that he's not the main writer on, but he kind of takes over as a director. Maybe he does a little bit editing on the script because we're probably going to talk about it. But Tarantino said that his last film, which I'm very surprised by, is his Star Trek film. And that was announced a year ago, or maybe less than a year ago, but it was a while ago that he said, I have a really good idea for a Star Trek film. I want to make this. But for a while, that film was supposed to be he would direct it, but he was too busy with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and whatever is next, maybe Kill Bill Volume 3, to actually write the script. So he would have gave his great idea to some writers. They would have wrote it. They actually did hire some people to write that script, and then he would direct it. But now it looks like he's going to do what he always does, write the script and then direct it. But I would actually be kind of interested to see him take his idea, let other writers handle it so he can focus on his other movies that he takes forever to work on, and then direct that adaptation of his own work.
Well, that again is still up in the air because Paramount hasn't committed to it yet. In fact, they couldn't even lock down Star Trek #4 with Chris Hemsworth and Chris Pike because contract issues rumored, or other issues, I'm sure, as well. But after that, they were going to do the Tarantino thing. Now the Tarantino thing seems to be possibly ahead of that. But Tarantino said before San Diego Comic-Con, like you said, that it would probably be his last film. I'll talk to you. I'll ask you a question about that here in a sec. But one last thing before we head into that is that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is playing in theaters this weekend. And I want to ask you, my friend, when you sit down to see it, what are you looking forward to? And what do you think, what do you think Tarantino will do most to bring up that era of Hollywood? Not necessarily saying the murders, because he is going to put a little portion of that movie and focus on the Manson family, the Sharon Tate murders, possibly putting his own spin on it, like he's changed other historical moments in time in some of his other films. But what are you looking forward to seeing when it comes to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
For me, I kind of know what I'm going to see. I'm not expecting to show up and be disappointed because he wasn't able to capture the essence of the 70s. I know he's going to do that. Every film he does, he controls every aspect of it. And I know he loves that time period so much. So I know he's going to do it justice. I'm kind of curious to see how he's going to handle the story. Is it could be a traditional A through Z storyline, or is it could be more like Pulp Fiction that's told out of order, or maybe not even told out of order, but there are multiple storylines within it? Because we do have the storyline of Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio as an actor and a stuntman, as well. We got Sharon Tate, the Manson killings. Is that going to be told in a traditional movie sense, or is it going to be multiple storylines weaved together? I'm kind of curious how he's going to handle that. In terms of what I'm excited to see from him, I want to see, and I'm hearing rumors that this is true, I want to see growth. And it's kind of weird to say I want to see him grow as a filmmaker, considering he's almost at the end of his filmmaking career. But directors now, Scorsese, they continue to grow over time, just like everyone should in their work. And what I want to see from Tarantino was that I want to see him kind of mature as a filmmaker, step away from, I don't want to say the stereotypes of Tarantino, but some of the mild controversy, his takes and the debate he's constantly getting, especially with Django Unchained and the Hateful Eight, on racism and the N word that he uses a lot throughout his films. I'm hearing, and I think this is true, but of course we'll see when it comes out this Friday. But I'm hearing that he's grown as a filmmaker, that you still will see his traditional Tarantino touch on dialogue and filmmaking, but it's not going to be such a raunchy Tarantino uh, fest that he normally does. It sounds like he's kind of grown as a filmmaker and he just focused on making a really, really good movie with touches of Tarantino rather than a really good Tarantino movie. So I'm excited to see where he has been going with his filmmaking and how he's grown.
I'll tell you what, I'm excited to see how he perceives that era in time, a time where I was barely even born. I was actually less than 1 year old at the time that whole thing takes place in 1969. So it's a transition period in history for America and especially in Hollywood, to see the big stars of the 50s and the 60s going away and leading into more of a, I don't want to say now it's not a modern age, but more into a modern age of that time in the 70s and 80s. And it's right here there in that cusp of where it's at in 1969. So it's, you're going to have to, it's going to be interesting to see how he perceives that era and time. I know he redid a lot of the area in Hollywood in order to accommodate and make it look like it's 1969 all over again. So again, I'm curious to see what he will do. It's funny because Jackie Brown was also filmed in many parts of an area that I'm familiar with when I grew up in Torrance, so in Torrance, California. So it's interesting to see how he's going to go ahead. And for me, sentimentality wise, it's still very interesting to see how it's going to be perceived and how it's going to be looked at, and how he sees that era of time in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So I'm looking forward to it as well. I cannot wait to see it. But like you said, if has he grown enough as a filmmaker to go ahead and present something to an audience that's not a full-blown Tarantino movie, but a quality movie with a Tarantino spin on it that's just enough Tarantino, but also enough that a modern audience can also grow and progress with him as well. So just
I agree. And I think that's where they're going with it because I've noticed that Sony's producing this. For the most part, he was distributed by Miramax, the Weinstein Company, big indie companies, but they're still, for most part, indie companies. Like they're big studios still, but not on the likes of Sony. So I've been seeing a whole ton Facebook, YouTube. I'm constantly seeing ads for it, which I'm fine with because I love Tarantino and I think I'm gonna love this movie. But I've been noticing a lot more promotion for it. Also, I've been noticing all over YouTube, him and the cast are going all over on any place they can go to promote the movie. So I think that this movie has a good chance to be his highest grossing picture. And I think, like you said, this might be a film that appeals to more people than just cult Tarantino fans. So I'm excited to see where it goes financially too.
when you see Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio out there, that's promoting it. That's kind of interesting because you don't normally see them going ahead and all out and appearing on other shows, live shows, talk shows, that things of that nature in order to go ahead and promote a product. So it's interesting to see that they're going ahead and they're full board behind it. That tells me not only, well, compensated, maybe it's contractual, what have you, but I think that they're also proud of the work and of what they saw as far as the film is concerned, and that they're willing to put their 2 cents behind it as well. So you're right. It does have a chance to be the highest grossing of all Tarantino's films, but it's going to be hard with a upcoming slate of films like Hobbs and Shaw. You've got The Lion King at the box office, so hopefully it doesn't get trampled under after 1 week of success this weekend. Let's hope it continues that success, and if it does have that early Oscar buzz, it probably will go ahead and have some acclaim and get to that point where I think we'll be satisfied, and Sony will be satisfied with it as well, which, as you know, is the the be all end all for Hollywood is, okay, how much chunk of change did you make? So, but again, I'm talking to Austen Sprake. He is the host of the Trash Talk podcast and Last Week in Basketball and the upcoming The Beer and Pretzel RPG podcast. You got to check out all three of those podcasts and the third one when it comes out on Apple Podcasts and everywhere you can get your podcasts that are out there. One last thing I want to talk to you about before I ask you a question about your shows, and that is on the future of Tarantino. where do you see it? He, like you said, he said that if he does the Star Trek or another film, let's say that Star Trek deal, does not go through, and he's going to do another project with something else, or even Kill Bill Volume 3, like you said, his 10th film will be his last. And let's say he makes a 10th film in then 3-4 years ahead, in 3-4 or 5 years in time. Do you see do you see that being the last film that he ever does? Because he said he would stop at 60, but do you think he'll just get that itch and do something again within the realm of directing even after his 10th project, whatever that will be?
Yes, definitely yes. He has been saying he hasn't said he wants to retire. He says he will stop at his 10th film and he keeps moving. Originally he said he was going to do 8 films. And then he said 10, and then he said 10 and the Kill Bill movies counts as one. So even he's kind of pushing his retirement, and he says he wants to write books. He might write plays too, which will be kind of interesting to see an actual book or a play written by Tarantino. That would actually be awesome to see. So I do believe it's going to be longer than the traditional 4 to 5 years for another Tarantino film. He might take 6 to 10 years off. I don't even think he's going to make 10 years though, because this is a guy that everyone in Hollywood knows. Everyone that's worked with him, either as producers or actors, everyone knows that this man just bleeds movies. Most directors, you just add a majority of the directors in Hollywood, and combined, they don't know as much about movies as he does. He's seen pretty much every movie that's been ever made. So I don't think he can retire because he just seems like the type that just needs to keep writing, and he will probably keep writing, but at his heart of hearts, he is a movie guy and he loves making movies. So I think he'll come back. And I also don't believe him claiming that the Star Trek film will be his 10th film. I think that even though I would love to see a Tarantino Star Trek film. That would be really cool to see. That doesn't really make sense for your final movie, like an original property. Even though the Star Trek film will be as original to him as possible, I think that he's going to want to retire with something that is more 100% Tarantino. Will that be an original movie like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, or will that still count for Kill Bill Volume 3? I think those have more of a chance to be his last film for a while at least than the Star Trek film. So long story short, I don't think so, and I doubt that his 10th and final, if it's supposed to be his final, according to him, will be a Star Trek film.
To use the pro wrestling analogy, as long as it isn't a retirement series, as long as Terry Funk, who had retirement matches for the course of over 20 years, and seemingly he had retirement matches here, retirement matches there. He always claimed it would be his last one, and then he would have another a few months away. Somebody willing to go ahead and pay him out, he would have a retirement match there too. So if his career, as long as he doesn't go ahead and get to the point where he just teases people, this is the last one, this is the last one, this is the last one, he'll be fine. I agree with you. He's too much of a film buff to go ahead and just cut it cold turkey. He's always going to want to scratch that itch, and he's always going to continue to go ahead and probably in some form or fashion be a part of the entertainment scene, probably until the day he dies. So that's just my opinion as well. So I agree with you on that. One last thing to ask you about, my friend. And again, this is Austen Sprake. You got to check out all of his great podcasts coming up. But you've heard it from me when it concerns the Trash Talk podcast, Last Week of Basketball, and the Beer and Pretzel RPG podcast. I want to hear from you, Austen. Why should people check out your awesome podcast, the Trash Talk podcast, Last Week in Basketball, and when it comes out, like you said, very soon, the Beer and Pretzel RPG podcast?
Well, it kind of covers everything. If you enjoy movies, comic books, TV shows, and games by tabletop RPGs, board games, or video games, we have that all covered for Trash Talk Podcast. It's me, my co-host Travis, and usually a guest or two, and we cover a new topic of the week every single week. So we might cover a series of films. We plan on doing the Alien movies in a couple weeks. We'll do the Predator films in a couple weeks, or we might cover a single film that just came out. Last week we covered Crawl, the new movie that came out. We're going to cover Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood soon. Or sometimes we'll cover a series of games. But with every week, we have our main topic, and we also have, at the end of the show, we wrap up with a comic of the week where I recommend the audience a good comic that I've been reading that is based off whatever our topic is. So there's some good alien comics that I will recommend for our alien podcast episode, for example. We'll also talk a game of the week, a board game, a tabletop RPG, or a video game that we've been playing that we really like. So if you're looking for new comics or games, just stick around till the end. We have some good recommendations. And we also do a fun debate at the end. And also, Trash Talk Podcast, we do this while drinking. So while Travis and I were big movie guys, we've been talking about movies since we're kids. We know how to talk about film. We add an extra flair to this by drinking while doing it. So by the end of the show, sometimes we're just a little bit buzzed. Sometimes by the end of the show, towards the debate section, things get a little crazy. In terms of other podcasts, if you like basketball, Last Week in Basketball, we cover and predict every game and series going forward. We also talk about our predictions going on from last week. We do a couple of fun side things with that as well. Even in my upcoming podcast, if anyone's interested in tabletop RPGs like D&D, the Beer and Pretzel RPG podcast will be all about introducing a new game every week. So little known, but really good games that you might not have heard of. And we'll play it, we'll react to it and review it. But also, if each episode, we'll have the writer of the game on at the end and we'll do a fun interview with them. So really, with all these podcasts that I've been having fun doing, we kind of cover all the bases. So especially if you're listening to this podcast, you love geeky stuff, you love pop culture and movies and TV shows and stuff. So definitely check out Trash Talk Podcast, to say the least.
Once again, it is Austen Sprake. He's putting out 3 great pop culture and sports type. If you're sports type podcasts that are out there, again, it's Trash Talk Podcast, Last Week in Basketball, and the upcoming Beer and Pretzel RPG podcast. You got to check it out today, wherever you can get your podcasts. Austin, it's been great having you on, talking about some Tarantino. Looking forward to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood myself. I know you are as well. I wish you all the best, and you're always welcome to come back on the show anytime you want to talk some great pop culture, sports, or anything else you want to talk about right here on the Pop Culture Cosmos.